In the vast expanse of the desert, where the sun scorched the sand relentlessly and the wind whispered only of desolation, a lone shepherd trudged along. His flock was nowhere in sight, scattered across the barren land, and his own strength was beginning to fade. Water was gone, his lips were parched, and the weight of the sun felt like a burning spear pressing upon his back. The desert, he realized, was a place that tested every ounce of endurance, and he was running out of time. He had been walking for hours, maybe even days, he no longer kept track. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the sand itself conspired to trap him. The blistering heat made the horizon shimmer, turning the world into an endless mirage. He felt like a lone figure in a world that had forgotten him, and for a moment, despair clawed at his chest. How had he ended up in this forsaken place? How had a simple journey with his flock turned into a fight for survival? His mind, exhausted and wandering, began to notice small details that otherwise would have gone unnoticed. Tiny footprints in the sand, a trail of movement too precise to be random. That's when he saw them, ants. A column of them, marching steadily in one direction, unbroken, as if they knew exactly where they were going. Each ant moved with purpose, a tiny creature defying the chaos of the desert. Something in him stirred. Perhaps it was the desperation, perhaps it was a spark of hope. He realized he had no better plan than to follow them. After all, if these small creatures could find their way in this harsh wasteland, perhaps they were heading towards something vital. With nothing left to lose, he adjusted his pace and followed the line of ants. The journey was slow. Every few steps, he had to navigate soft dunes that threatened to swallow him, and the heat continued to sap his strength. Yet, the ants never faltered. They marched on relentlessly, weaving around rocks, climbing over ridges, and disappearing into small crevices only to reappear moments later. Their determination seemed almost otherworldly, a silent lesson in perseverance. Hours passed, and the shepherd's legs trembled from fatigue. The sun, still high in the sky, made the sand so hot it scorched the soles of his feet. Sweat poured down his face, and his throat felt like sandpaper. Yet, he kept going, driven by some instinctive trust in the tiny creatures he now regarded as guides. His body screamed for rest, but his mind clung to hope. Then, slowly, he began to notice subtle changes. The sand, which had been unyielding and hard, softened beneath his feet. The wind, which had blown scorching gusts, shifted to a cooler, gentler breeze. He looked up and noticed a hint of clouds gathering in the sky, an unusual sight in a desert so dry. Something was changing, and the shepherd felt it deep in his bones. Perhaps salvation was near. As he pressed on, following the tireless ants, the landscape began to transform. Small patches of green appeared, almost like mirages, but they persisted. A cluster of palms came into view, forming a tiny oasis hidden amidst the dunes. Water glimmered between the trees, reflecting the sun in dazzling flashes. The shepherd could hardly believe his eyes. After hours of wandering through a seemingly endless desert, he had found life, a sanctuary. He approached the oasis carefully, unsure if it was real. Every step felt surreal, like he had stumbled into a dream he had long given up on. The ants continued their march into the heart of the oasis, disappearing into the undergrowth. He looked around and saw a small pool of water, shaded by palms, its surface calm and inviting. With trembling hands, he drank deeply, feeling life return to his parched body. The water was cool, pure, and revitalizing, washing away the fatigue that had threatened to consume him. As he rested under the shade of the palms, he couldn't help but marvel at the timing of everything. The ants had led him here, moving with a determination he could barely comprehend. How many lives had these tiny creatures saved through instincts so finely tuned that they could survive and navigate even the harshest conditions? He realized then that nature, in all its complexity, had a way of guiding those who paid attention. Even in the vast emptiness of the desert, nothing was truly random. Hours passed, and the shepherd's strength returned. As he lay beneath the trees, he noticed that the clouds had thickened, darkening the sky above. The wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of rain, a rare gift in a place where water was more precious than gold. And then it happened. Drops fell from the sky, softly at first, then heavier, until a gentle rain washed over the oasis. The shepherd raised his face to the heavens, feeling the life-giving water soak into his skin, cleansing him from the sun's relentless assault. The rain continued for hours, filling the small pool and nourishing the palm trees around him. He watched as the desert, so dry and lifeless just a day before, seemed to awaken. The oasis, which had already been a refuge, now became a sanctuary in every sense of the word. He realized how close he had been to death, and yet, through a combination of luck, observation, and the silent guidance of tiny ants, he had survived. Sitting there, soaked and exhausted, he thought about the lessons the desert had taught him. The harshness of the environment was a test, but even in its cruelty, there was wisdom to be found. Every living creature, no matter how small, had a role, a path, and a purpose. The ants had shown him the way when all human logic failed. Nature, he realized, communicated in subtle ways, and survival depended on noticing these whispers. As the rain slowed to a drizzle, he reflected on how this experience had changed him. The desert had stripped him bare, exposing not just his physical vulnerabilities but his mental and emotional resilience. He felt a newfound respect for life in all its forms and a deep gratitude for the smallest of beings that had led him to safety. Each ant, moving with relentless determination, had demonstrated a courage and instinct he could only aspire to. By evening, the rain had ceased, leaving the desert washed clean, the sand glistening like polished gold. The shepherd knew he could not stay forever, his flock needed him, and he would have to return to civilization. Yet, he also knew that he carried with him a profound understanding of survival, patience, and attentiveness to the world around him. The oasis was proof that life, even in the harshest conditions, could flourish if one paid attention to its subtle signs. Before leaving, he took a moment to study the ants once more. They had returned to their natural course, moving with the same precision as before. He realized that they did not lead him out of kindness or intent, but because that was their path, their instinct. Yet, their existence had intersected with his in the most miraculous way. He smiled, understanding that sometimes, guidance comes from the most unexpected sources. As he began his journey back, feeling renewed, he carried the memory of the oasis and the lesson of the ants with him. He would tell his story, not just as a tale of survival, but as a reminder of the wisdom inherent in nature and the unexpected ways help can arrive. Life, he realized, was often hidden in details too small to notice at first glance, and the key to survival was recognizing and following them, even when hope seemed lost. The desert, once a place of fear and desolation, had become a teacher. It had shown him the value of observation, patience, and trust in the natural order. The shepherd now understood that survival was not just about strength or knowledge, it was about humility, attentiveness, and a willingness to learn from every living being around you. The ants, the water, the palms, the rain, they were all teachers in their own right, guiding him to safety through actions that were both ordinary and extraordinary. He would never forget the day the ants led him to the oasis. It was a story of desperation turned into salvation, of a barren land transformed by life, of a human being reminded that even in isolation, he was not alone. The desert had a voice, subtle and quiet, and for those willing to listen, it offered guidance, refuge, and hope. And as he walked away, leaving the oasis behind, he carried with him not just survival, but a deep sense of connection with the world, a reverence for its smallest creatures, and the knowledge that sometimes, salvation comes not from grand gestures or human intervention, but from the quiet, steadfast march of an ant across the endless sands of the desert. The desert stretched endlessly before him, a sea of golden sand under the blistering sun, but now the shepherd had a guide, a single line of ants, moving with unwavering purpose. He stumbled at first, unsure whether following these tiny creatures could truly lead to safety. Yet, desperation forced him forward. Every step he took felt heavier than the last, the sun's heat relentless on his back, his throat dry, his skin stinging from the scorching air. He hadn't realized how quickly hope could dwindle in the vast emptiness of the desert, but here, strangely, a fragile thread of it had returned. The ants moved steadily, crawling over grains of sand and weaving through cracks in the hardened desert floor. The shepherd bent down to observe them closer. Each ant carried something, small fragments of leaves, grains of food, tiny treasures of survival. Their coordination was remarkable, they never collided, never strayed from the path. It struck him then that perhaps survival was not about strength or size, it was about persistence, discipline, and understanding one's environment. If creatures so small could navigate this hostile land, maybe he could too. He continued to follow them, stepping carefully, trying not to disturb their rhythm. Hours passed, the sun climbed higher, then began its slow descent, and the desert began to reveal its true peril. Sand dunes shifted under his weight, threatening to swallow his feet, while wind gusts scoured his skin, carrying fine grains that stung like needles. Each step became a battle, fatigue gnawed at his muscles, and every breath felt like fire in his chest. He had no water, no shade, no certainty, but still, he moved forward, drawn by the unwavering determination of the tiny guides. As the day wore on, subtle changes in the desert's appearance caught his attention. The sand beneath his feet became softer, the air slightly cooler, almost imperceptibly so. The sun, while still intense, no longer scorched him with the same ferocity. Clouds, thin and wispy at first, began to gather in the horizon, their shapes delicate but promising. Something was shifting, he realized, perhaps an oasis was near, or some hidden shelter that had remained concealed in this vast wilderness. Every instinct within him told him to keep moving. Night approached, bringing a chilling contrast to the relentless heat of the day. The temperature plummeted sharply, and the desert that had seemed lifeless now hummed with nocturnal life. Small creatures scuttled across the sand, their eyes reflecting the moonlight. He could hear the distant cry of a desert fox and the rustling of unseen animals. Though he had been terrified by the day, the night brought a new set of challenges. Darkness made navigation nearly impossible, and the cold gnawed at his exposed skin. Yet still, the ants moved ahead, a faint but unwavering trail guiding him through the night. Hours blurred together. The shepherd's body ached, his muscles trembling from exertion and hunger. He had no food, no water, and yet he pushed onward, driven by the faint hope that the ant's instinctual journey would lead him to salvation. At times, he doubted the wisdom of following creatures so small and seemingly insignificant. But each time he considered abandoning the path, he looked down and saw their relentless march, and something inside him renewed, a sense of purpose, a quiet understanding that the natural world often held the answers that human knowledge could not provide. Morning arrived, painting the desert with pale gold and pink hues. The shepherd was exhausted beyond measure, his feet blistered, his lips cracked and dry. Yet, as the sun rose, he noticed something astonishing. The terrain was changing. Where before there had been nothing but sand and rock, small patches of green began to appear. Tiny shrubs, hardy desert plants, and tufts of grass peeked through the sand. The air, once hot and oppressive, carried a faint freshness, scented with moisture. The desert was no longer empty, life had begun to reveal itself. His eyes widened in disbelief as he caught sight of the first palm trees, distant and faint against the horizon. Could it be real? Could this be the sanctuary he had been unconsciously seeking? He quickened his pace, heart pounding in his chest, as the ants continued their unbroken line, leading him deeper into this unexpected refuge. The landscape shifted gradually, sand dunes giving way to firmer ground, and the occasional puddle of water sparkled like liquid diamonds in the sunlight. Every step seemed miraculous, as if the desert itself was guiding him toward life rather than death. Eventually, he arrived at the edge of a hidden oasis. It was small but lush, a green jewel amidst the golden desert. Palm trees swayed gently in the wind, and a pool of water reflected the bright sky above. The shepherd felt a wave of relief so intense that he collapsed to his knees, drinking deeply from the pool. The water was cool, replenishing, and almost intoxicating in its freshness. He closed his eyes, letting the sensation of life flood through him, washing away the hours of suffering and the overwhelming despair of the desert. The oasis was alive with sound. The rustle of palm fronds, the chirping of birds, and the soft movement of insects. It was a stark contrast to the silent, lifeless expanse he had endured. The shepherd lay beneath the shade of the tallest palm, exhausted but safe, and marveled at the way nature had guided him. It was a humbling realization. The smallest of creatures, the ants, had led him to life. They had no knowledge of his existence, no intent to save him, yet their instincts intersected with his need in the most miraculous way. As he rested, he noticed the sky darkening once more. Clouds gathered with a weight that suggested rain, and a soft breeze brought the unmistakable scent of moisture. The shepherd raised his face toward the sky, feeling the first drops of rain kiss his skin. It was soft at first, almost tentative, then heavier, until a gentle but steady downpour drenched the oasis. The desert drank deeply, and so did he, not just the water, but the realization that survival often required attention, humility, and trust in forces beyond oneself. The shepherd spent hours beneath the trees, watching as the desert transformed under the rain. Tiny streams formed, the sand turned dark and rich, and life flourished in ways he had never imagined possible. He observed the ants once more, still moving with determination, now navigating puddles and softened earth, unaffected by the storm. They had survived countless challenges and dangers, yet they continued with their purpose, a silent testament to resilience. The shepherd understood then that the lesson of the desert was not just survival, but harmony, living in accordance with nature, observing its cues, and respecting its power. Night fell again, this time with a sense of peace. The oasis glowed under the moonlight, reflecting the gentle ripples of water and the swaying palms. The shepherd felt a profound gratitude, not just for his survival but for the extraordinary journey he had experienced. The desert, which had seemed merciless and unforgiving, had revealed its hidden wisdom. The smallest creatures had become guides, the harshest conditions had taught patience and humility, and the oasis had reminded him that life persists in even the most unlikely places. He knew that he could not stay forever. His flock was lost somewhere in the desert, and he would need to return to civilization. But he also understood that the memory of this place, and the lessons it had imparted, would stay with him forever. Every moment of suffering had been a teacher, every drop of rain a reminder of life's persistence, and every tiny ant a symbol of guidance through instinct and determination. He carried this knowledge in his heart, ready to face the world with renewed strength and wisdom. The next morning, the shepherd prepared to leave the oasis. He drank deeply from the pool one last time and observed the ants, who continued their journey as if nothing had happened. He smiled, understanding that they had not saved him intentionally, they had simply lived according to their nature. Yet, their ordinary actions had extraordinary consequences, intersecting with his need at the precise moment of desperation. It was a lesson in perspective. Sometimes salvation arrives not through grand gestures but through quiet, steadfast existence. As he walked back toward the desert, leaving the oasis behind, he felt lighter, not just physically but spiritually. The harsh journey, the relentless sun, the biting wind, and the scorching sand had stripped him to his core, but in doing so, they had revealed resilience he didn't know he possessed. The world, he realized, was full of signs and guides if one only chose to notice. Survival was not just about strength or luck, it was about awareness, attentiveness, and the courage to follow even the smallest beacon of hope. The shepherd's journey back was still challenging, but he carried within him the lessons of the oasis and the ants. Every step, though difficult, was filled with purpose. The desert no longer seemed purely hostile, it was a teacher, a mirror of his own endurance, and a reminder that life could flourish against all odds. He knew that when he finally reunited with his flock, he would share this story, not just as a tale of survival, but as a testament to the extraordinary power of observation, trust, and the hidden guidance of nature. By the time he reached familiar ground, the shepherd had changed profoundly. The desert had tested him to his limits, the ants had guided him without intent, and the oasis had restored his life and hope. He had learned that in the harshest conditions, even the smallest creatures could hold the key to survival, and even the bleakest moments could lead to miraculous discoveries. Life, he understood, was rarely about control, it was about attentiveness, humility, and the courage to move forward even when the path was uncertain. And so, the shepherd continued his journey, carrying not just his flock but a newfound respect for the world, for the lessons hidden in its smallest details, and for the resilience that lived in every living being, no matter how small. The desert had revealed its secrets, and through its trials, he had emerged stronger, wiser, and more attuned to the subtle guidance of nature itself.